Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. Once again, I was not able to catch the disclaimer, so hear the disclaimer out of my mouth. Please don't forget that we are talking about playing a computer game and leave the real railway stuff and installations to the professionals. Hey AJ, thank you for moderating my stream. I wish you a good evening too. And we are back in Austria actually, because we want to have a look at the safety systems that are running in Austria, especially PZB 90 that we obviously already know from Germany. But nevertheless, there are some interesting details in the Austrian implementation of this system, and it is especially on the Vorarlberg route. So I think it's totally worth it to have a look at the PZB 90 implementation that we have in the S-Bahn Vorarlberg and have some signaling constellations looked at and the safety systems installations that go with it. And for the first time on this stream, I will use the new free roam mode to set up some situations and to look at it without the need to fiddle about with save games and stuff or run the whole service, just to take us to the point. Did I say Australia? CD Radar. Are we back in Australia? No, we are in Austria. Austria and Australia. It's an all-time greatest source of confusion. No, we are in Austria, not in Australia. I don't think they use PZB in Australia. But I would totally encourage DTG to have an Australian route or more of them in the game so that we can investigate Australian routes. I think I have watched some cap views from Australian routes, and they have an interesting mixture of UK-ish signaling and stuff that looks more like American signaling, and would be super interesting to look into that more closely. But today we are in Austria, and what I would like to do is start with a scenario. I think it is here, the international rescue scenario, because it will take us to some interesting signal constellations in Austria and in Germany as well. So it is the first thing that I wanted to start here. Ability to spawn train areas totally OP and best feature. Yeah, that's what I wrote on the forums today, CD Radar. It is great. It makes it opens up so many possibilities, especially when you want to look at what the dispatcher does for certain pathings and stuff. That this is, and I think DTG was very brave to open up the game in that way, so that everybody can look behind the curtains a bit and see what is supposed to be happening and what is actually happening. And you will have hundreds of people like myself pointing out to them that this is not how it is supposed to be, and if you send this train from there to there, then this should happen and not something else. And I guess, well, and obviously they magnified the possible source of bugs and errors and stuff. So I think it was a bold move, and I can only encourage them to do bold moves of that kind. At the moment they are all frustrated, obviously, because all the packaged legacy DLCs are not working anymore. What nobody saw coming, obviously. Just like last time when the same happened only on Epic Game Store. Well, I think they will figure this out eventually. Yeah. Where are we here? We are with our talent train in a siding at... Now I've forgotten where we are. Or we can look at it. We are at Lustenau, at the Swiss border, and we are waiting for a green light. There will not be a green light, but it will be a shunting signal first, because we are sitting here, and the first part of our journey will take us as a shunting service out on the main circuit and on the main line. This is, as we have seen in the last stream, a signal that prohibits shunting. Verschubverbot. Shunting prohibited, so we must not pass this. As a train service, we would be allowed to pass it, but at the moment we are not a train service yet. We will switch on being a train service as soon as we are out on the main line, I guess. At the moment we have to stop here and let this other talent pass. Did I put everything in? And now you might have seen a change from the horizontal orientation to the diagonal, well, yeah, diagonal orientation. And we can set our train to moving. We're running in the PZB startup program. I turned it up to maximum brightness. Nevertheless, we can only barely see that the 70 and the 85 indicator are flashing alternatingly, so that we know we are in the starting program limited to 40. Typically, as soon as we got a green light, we would release. We will come back to this later. That releasing is actually quite restrictive in Austria, at least from what I've found in the rules. We have to pass the exit signal here and then clear all the interlocking after the exit signal, and then we can release, but most of the time then the starting sequence has run out on its own. Here is a 13 sign. What I will also use is the photo mode, so that I can direct your attention to things. Well, great that they have those counterweights now on their overhead catenary, but they should just coordinate people who put the signals and people who put the scenery items a bit better. If that was my railway, I would want to have a talk with the foreman of that crew that put that counterweight or counterweight there. So, nevertheless, we can release. Probably the starting sequence has run out on its own accord, and we can accelerate to line speed of 130. Knowing that we will have to slow down to 110 later. Those red on white signs are our permanent speed signs. In Germany we would expect an LF6 sign, this yellow triangle telling us that there is a speed reduction incoming. In Austria we have learned in the last stream that we won't get this all the time, but only if the reduction is more, or at least 20% and at least 20 kilometers per hour, and from 130 to 110 it is 20 kilometers per hour, but it is less than 20%, because 20% out of 130 would be, here's the 11 sign, 26. And so we are not getting warned, but we need to know that from our route knowledge, or from our Ebula system or a similar thing, or from our Buchfahrplan that we have on board. Passing this station here, Halt or something like that. Limit is going back to 130. But we are approaching the intersection that will take us on the main line running from Lindau to Bludenz. And now we are getting a restrictive signal first, and again I will use the photo mode to demonstrate what we are up against. This signal, if you joined us last week, you know that this is a distance signal telling us the next main signal will be a clear 60 signal. So this is two greens diagonally arranged with one yellow telling us that we have to prepare that the next signal will be at 60. It is fitted with a magnet, a 1000 Hertz magnet. We will see that this is just what we expect, and we will have to hit our Wachsamkeitstaste, our vigilance key, to acknowledge it. The interesting fact is that at the next signal we will actually be allowed to go 80, not 60. So I will come back to this here, and according to the rules I would probably have expected an 8 in yellow here to accompany this sign, so that the signal is already telling us that we are... Oops! That was not good. With all my explanations, I hit the wrong set of keys and activated the emergency brake, but that's okay, I caught the train again. I drove too much on the freight locomotives where the brakes are on the right hand. We have to slow down to 480 for the 1000 Hertz, and now you can see it again. Again, I will switch into photo mode. Now we have this signal on the top. Last time tells us green over green is a clear 60 signal, but with the white 8 it is actually upgraded to an 80. We are allowed to pass this signal with 80, and again we are getting the same signal we had before for the next block. Expect again clear 60. We will see that the next signal will allow us to go 80 again. So, with all the explaining, I actually managed to go beyond the 85 probably, that the PZB wants us to slow down to, and got in an emergency brake. If you got an emergency brake, you have to wait until the train gets to a standstill, then hit the release key, and then you can actually start the train again. It takes a bit for the brake pipe to fill again and for the brake cylinders to clear. Right-hand driving is not common, the CD radar. Well, it's a different thing with the Vectron still, right? Because there you have the e-brake on your combined power handle and still use some right-hand brakes, but I was using the Traxx 2 a lot on this route here, and there you have the brakes on the right, both of them, e-brakes and air brakes alike. So as nice as the photo mode thing is, it kind of breaks your focus. Well, we are running under an expect 60. According to the signal from our timetable, we know that this signal here again allows us to go 80, not 60, so we can pass it with 80 until we are through the interlocking, and then you've seen it, we got a distance signal telling us expect clear. So as soon as we are out of the interlockings, we can go back to line speed. Yes, only right-hand driving. Your metro trains are only right-hand driven? That is interesting. That is really rare. Again, expect 60. And now it will actually be 60, because the next signal will not sport. Signal repeater telling us expect a speed restriction at the next signal. And the next main signal will not have the white 8, but it will have green over green telling us to go at 60. Again, signal repeater is telling us expect clear with speed restriction. And the main signal is green over green, limit to 60, and the distance signal is telling us expect to stop at the next main. We have to acknowledge we get 1000 Hertz. We are limited to, well, 85 by the PZB, and we will have actually to prepare for a 500 Hertz and slow down below the 65. But we have already discussed this on the forum this week. There are not many 500 Hertz magnets in Austria, and especially not on this route. And we will discuss later in the presentation what they have actually to make up for the missing 500 Hertz magnets. The next main signal that can be read is at the end of the station. Maybe it cleared already. I can't hurt to go slowly. No, here the repeater tells us that it is still at red, and this is a thing what is a bit special for Austria, that those repeaters actually have 1000 Hertz magnets, so this is why I acknowledge that one. In real life, according to the rules, the repeater would not have shown this aspect with white lines, but with yellow lines, indicating, so now it cleared, indicating that this magnet is actually protected with a 1000 Hertz magnet. We are still in a restricted monitoring, limited to 40. Even after passing the signal, we can faintly see the 80 and the 75 flashing. Again, rules for releasing from a restricted or a non-restricted monitoring are more restricting in Austria. We will get to that later in the presentation, when you're actually allowed to release. But if you want to be on the safe side, then you just run it out. You wait until the alternate flashing stops and it goes back to the normal flashing of the 85, then you can accelerate to 85 without getting a penalty brake, and as soon as the 85 stops flashing, then you can accelerate to line speed again. The moment the 85 is still flashing, now it stopped flashing. I don't think that you can see that on the stream. I can barely see it here. But that's the thing with this train and the lighting. Line speed is 100. Distance signal tells us to expect clear at the next main signal. We're approaching Hörbranz, Lochau, or Lochau-Hörbranz. We can see from afar already that the next distance signal tells us to expect to stop at the next main, acknowledge for the 1000 Hertz, slow down beyond the 85 for the 1000 Hertz, monitoring then below the 60, expecting the 500 Hertz. In parentheses, that will not come because there are no 500 Hertz magnets on this route. But nevertheless, we have to slow down anyway because we must be able to stop at the next signal if it is actually red. But I think I'm not sure. Maybe it has cleared already, maybe it is still red. Can't really see. No, it's still red. It is still red. Yeah, but you see no 500 Hertz when approaching the red signal. So in Austria, the driver has the responsibility, without the help of the 500 Hertz magnet, to slow down in time to be able to stop in front of the red signal. You can already see the signs that warn us about the incoming neutral section or dead section. We've talked about this in the stream last week. Now it cleared. Good thing is we're not in a restricted 500 Hertz limiting us to 20, but in a restricted 1000 Hertz limiting us to 40. We have to pick up a bit speed. This sign tells us expect the dead section. Obviously we have to build up some speed to be able to roll through the dead section, so I will accelerate to the 40. And then now the next signal that is incoming tells us when we are passing this signal, the main circuit breaker needs to be off. Now we are in the dead section, and the next sign tells us now you can turn it on again. Now we can accelerate again. Careful though, because maybe you are still in the limited monitoring, in the restricted monitoring, but no, I can't see anything flashing, so I guess we can accelerate again. For that, it would be really great if we could read the indicators properly. Now she wants a drive-by again. Good thing the train is short. Here's your drive-by, AJ. I hope we did not miss any important signal. So, and now we are in Germany and getting a Vr2 signal telling us to prepare for a reduction to 40. The signal is armed with a 1000 Hertz magnet. This is why I acknowledged. And we are slowing down. And now, interesting fact, the scenario involves that we are picking up a train that has broken down in a piece of track. And I think it is debatable whether the signaling that we are getting is the correct signaling for this situation, because now we are getting an HP2 at the next main signal, semaphore, but still green over yellow, allowing us to go 40 here. So with American terms, there will be a clear 40. The thing is, it won't be clear where we are going, because we are not passing another main signal until we hit the broken down train. We will stop in front of a signal that is in the game. We will look at this closer when we actually stop there, but that does not have any visual representation. You can see it on the map that it is there, but you can't actually see any signal connected with it. So now we're going across the switch. This is why they slowed us down to 40 and going on the opposite track. Obviously we need to go on the opposite track to pick up the train that sits there. Normally we would not go on this track. We're not going to the left. This protection signal was not for us, it was for the track to the left. The VR0 here on the left, the distant signal semaphore, is not for us either. Neither is the main signal on our left, we're seeing it from behind. The barber pole indicator is telling us that we have to stop soon. We're keeping our eyes peeled for any signals that might require us to stop. We can see magnets on the tracks, but they are on the left side. That means they are for the opposite direction, not for us. That's the Sifa. The Sifa alarm actually makes the microphone indicator on my OBS go all red. So we're approaching a bank of signals. You can see that the main signal on the right has just cleared to a full clear. The ones on the left are still at stop at HP0. And for our track here, there is no signal, actually. Nevertheless, we are required to stop here. Couple up to the stranded unit and get ready to head back. But why you can see here in the game there is a red signal, and I can tell you, I tried it. You can spat out if you pass this spot without asking the dispatcher. Contact the signaler to access the stocked unit. So what do? We contact the signaler. The signaler tells us proceed at restricted speed, so we got our permission. It is still red, this signal, but now we can pass it. We don't need to hit the override key, the Befehl 40. We can just go. So this is a peculiarity here in the game. It is an invisible signal in the game that can be run over when being read after asking the signaler's permission. And since we passed the HP2 telling us clear 40 more or less, we have not passed another main signal anymore and approaching the stranded unit. And obviously with this running on the track for the opposite direction and the semaphore signals, there can be a lot of things possible and actually prototypical that seems strange. But still I find it strange that we're getting a clear signal when we're going in a piece of track that is actually already occupied by another train. So I'd be very reluctant to route a train into an occupied block with any clear signal, even an HP2. I think this is something where the signal at the beginning of the block should show an HP0 and you'd be a Sperrfahrt to pick up this train. But correct me in the comments if I'm wrong here. Humph. Set the master controller to 0. Actually, I think in other scenarios they tell you to set the master controller to 100% brake in this situation when you're changing caps, but here you are supposed to set it to 0. Set the reverser to off. We can do that. Set the master switch to off. We can do that as well. Signal lights to off, because we have one in between. Set the train brakes to hold. To hold, remove the handle. Head to the other end of the train and don't forget to switch off the PZB and the Sifa, because at least on some trains this can mess up everything if you have the safety systems on the other end activated. Master switch to active. The brake handle. The reverser. The instrument lights. The indicator brightness to 100. He's not in the list, but still. I want to see a bit. Headlights. Safety systems. Power. At least it is not raining. I've encountered a weird bug, I think it is. The new scoring system scores you for subtracts some points if you're not using the wipers in the rain. So usually when you're driving with the safety systems on, again we are in the starting program, so careful not to go faster than 40. Usually you get 65 points per click for driving with safety system on. Now we're only getting 30 in this scenario. Well, whatever. In the timetable mode you typically get 65, and if you miss to turn on the wipers in the rain, then you're only getting 52. And sometimes you're only getting 52 even when your wipers are running, and this is because the game wants you to turn on the wipers on the rear end of your train to give you full points. Well, obviously sometimes the game checks the wrong end of your cab or of your train when checking if you are doing everything properly. If I read the indicators that are almost unreadable correctly, then we are good to accelerate to line speed, what is now 100. After getting in this yard here, Lindau-Reutin, and we can go back to Austria. Drive this train, I think, to Wolfurt, and then we will have the presentation. The penalties for speeding, on the other hand, I have found are much more lenient than it was in Train Sim World 3 with the old scoring system. With the old scoring system, a bit too fast for a fraction of a second and you get docked. And here you can actually go a bit too fast, go into the yellow, go out again, and you don't get docked for speeding. So there is some measure or some degree of leeway. Getting closer to the border again. This is the last signal on the German side. One last KS1. And that already is an Austrian distance signal telling us Hauptsignal zeigt frei. Expect clear. Approaching the neutral section again. Get the controller to 0. Not necessarily, but I think it's the best to do. Be prepared. Open the main circuit breaker. Don't forget to acknowledge the yellow distance signal. You might have realized I got the combined brake and throttle handle back into braking, even though the main circuit breaker was open. What actually activates the air brakes, not the dynamic brakes, but the air brakes at least, because we had to slow down for the yellow distance signal. Here a word of caution: on slippery tracks you can totally send your train sliding when you have the brakes on heavily. Switch off the main circuit breaker for the dead section and then maybe even increase the brakes during the dead section as long as the main circuit breaker is open. You don't have dynamic brakes, and then you switch on the main circuit breaker again, you close it, and then the dynamics come back all of a sudden, and this can whoosh, send your train sliding. We can set the master controller to 0. The train will be held in place as long as we are not applying any power. The train will keep the pressure in the brake cylinders at about 2 bar. Again, don't forget, we stopped during 1000 Hertz. That means we are in a restricted 1000 Hertz, limited to 40. 75 and 85 are the 70 and 85 are flashing alternatingly. But this is, if I understand this correctly, actually a situation where you can release past the exit signal, cleared the interlockings with your whole train, and then you're allowed to release and accelerate to line speed. But we will come to that in the presentation. That is a really beautiful part of this route along the Bodensee. Distance signal tells us to expect clear at the entrance to Bregenz Hafen. So again, we can stick to line speed 100. If we don't get any adverse signals, we can pass Bregenz with this 100. Clear, expect clear. Line speed increasing to 110. Clear. Sifa. Expect clear. Clear, expect clear. Lauterach. Line speed increasing to 140. Clear, expect clear. No, that was not Lauterach, that was Bregenz, Riederburg or something. Now we're getting to Lauterach. But first we are going across the intersection where we came in. And now I see something yellow coming up, so can't hurt to slow down. It is two yellows with one green telling us clear, expect 40. We have to slow down beyond the 85 first, so that we don't get the Zwangsbremsung from the 1000 Hertz. And then we can moderate the slowing down for the 40. So when you're actually going 140, it is quite harsh to slow down to the 85 or beyond the 85. So it always helps to start slowing down when you see the signal coming. But even on snowy conditions, 70% brake force is usually okay. So this signal tells us 40 now, expect 40 again. And this expect 40 again is again interesting, if that is actually what we should see here. Because expect 40 is actually telling us Hauptsignal zeigt Frei mit 40. The next main signal shows clear with a speed limit to 40. Let's see if we ever encounter a next main signal. We're going into the yard at this point. Good thing the dispatcher knows where we are supposed to go in this labyrinth. We have not passed any main signal that shows clear with 40. Obviously not a bad idea to go 40, but this is what the main signal told us. This tells us that we may pass this signal. This is a protection signal. Just telling us that we can pass it, even as a train service, not only as a shunting service. And now we're running into a dead end. You might not see it, but at the end of this track there is a buffer block. So there was, in the path that we were sent, there was no more main signal, especially no main signal that showed clear 40. Well, we're going on a buffer block here, so I don't know. Maybe we should have gotten a double yellow on the distance signal here. Because if we expected a clear 40, then we expected this in vain, because there was no clear 40. There was this scenario here with some peculiarities in the signaling and safety system implementation. And I think this is the time to go into presentation mode and have a look at how it is supposed to be with the PZB 90 and the other safety systems in Austria. Again, this is where I got my knowledge from. Again, the ÖBB Infra regulatory stuff that you can download freely from the internet. That is not only, we have it on the on last week's video, not only the Signalbuch with all the signals, but we have now the Dienstvorschrift ZSB 12 that tells us how to handle the safety systems. There is a Dienstanweisung that has a supplementary stuff for that, and then there is a Regelwerk that defines the requirements for the PZB 90 if it wants to be used in ETCS as a Class B system, with ETCS STM are probably limited supervision on ETCS level 1. This is the source more or less for what I am telling you now. What do we have on our Austrian trains? You know this matrix here from former videos where we always have a look at what covers all the different things that we want to check and make sure. We want to check if the driver is present and active, unlike in the UK where we have two different systems. For that we have one system, that is the Sifa, that we all know that we have to activate every couple of seconds, 60, 90 seconds, depends a bit on the vehicle. Otherwise we will get first an indicator lighting up, then an audible alarm, and if we don't react to that, then we get the penalty brake. So unlike other vigilance systems, especially in the United Kingdom or in the United States, that don't require activation as long as you are operating any controls. With the Sifa, it is independent of operating controls. You have to hit the Sifa button or let go of the Sifa pedal and push it again every 60 or 90 seconds. Otherwise you will get this, even if you are operating other controls heavily. Then, to check if the driver is reacting to signals and track speed limits, we have PZB, that is the Punktförmige Zugbeinflussung that we know from Germany. We know that there have been different versions over the time. It started in the 1920s, 30s with the Indusi, and then it was developed until we got the PZB 90. That is the system that is running in Germany as well, and in Austria as well. There are obviously some vehicles that are still using the PZB 60, but they are not in the game, so I will mostly be talking about the PZB 90 program. And this includes the 2000 Hz magnets that provide a stop signal protection in a way that those magnets stop the train within an overlap. So a system that does not prevent the SPAD, it does not prevent the train from running the red signal, but it mitigates the effects by stopping the train in a certain distance behind the red signal in the overlap, or Durchrutschweg in German. What we also have are the GPAs, the Geschwindigkeitsprüfabschnitte. That is a bit like the speed sensor loops in the TPWS in the UK, for example, or other installations of that kind, that are installations in the track that check if the train is too fast for that part of the track, and if it is like that, then they initiate Zwangsbremsung. We have a video about the GPA in Germany. Since I have not found any on this route here, I will not talk about this anymore in this stream for Austria. So if you're interested in how those GPAs work, there is one PZB special for the GPAs on my YouTube channel. And this can, and I've left this open here because it is a bit complicated, you can get a penalty break if you do not satisfy this system. Apart from that, we have some routes if the train is supposed to go faster than 160 in Austria. We have some LZB, also linienförmige Zugbeinflussung that we know from the ICE trains in the game. Schnellfahrstrecke Köln, Schnellfahrstrecke Kassel, Würzburg, München, Augsburg, Dresden, Riesa. There are always Hamburg-Lübeck. There are no Hamburg-Lübeck, not, but I just thought of Hamburg-Lübeck because I was there with the ICE trains a couple of weeks ago on my stream, but there is no LZB. In Austria, there are some lines with LZB, but not in the game yet. We will see if we get LZB lines in Austria. And also there are some lines in Austria that use ETCS, European Train Control System already. Again, not in the game. We have videos about the ETCS implemented so far in the game only on the S-Bahn Zentralschweiz Luzern-Zürichsee DLC by Rivet Games. And we have, I think, 2 or 3 streams covering this ETCS stuff there. So if you're interested, then I invite you to watch those videos on my YouTube channel. So this was the overview, and I want to have a closer look on the PZB 90 system, or PZB system. So what is the basic idea of that thingy? To prevent the train from causing damage when running a red signal, we have magnets in the track that can be read in parentheses by the train, and the train can react to certain inputs from 2000 Hz, 1000 Hz and 500 Hz magnets. So there is a device on the train that can read those signals sent by those magnets and react to those 3 different signals accordingly and according to its program. And if it gets a 2000 Hz signal, the reaction is an immediate penalty break. So there is no further ado, it will just initiate the penalty break and stop the train within the overlap, so that the train might run the red signal, so the SPAD is not prevented, unlike in other systems, like in the Axis with the positive train stop system, or other systems that are able to stop the train in front of the red signal. The PZB does not, but it mitigates the damage by stopping the train in the overlap. When we are approaching the red signal, we're typically getting a double yellow, the Vorsichtssignal in Austria, and as we know that from Germany, those signals are armed with a 1000 Hz magnet, and this is what we have to acknowledge, and then we get the 1000 Hz monitoring and have to act accordingly. This is the idea. And then in Germany we have them a lot, and in Austria they are in the rules as well. If you look especially on the Anforderungen in this Class B system, PZB 90, you always have them in the description, the 500 Hz magnets that are between the 1000 Hz and the 2000 Hz magnets when you're running up to a red signal. So actually on new tracks and installations, they should be there in Austria as well. On the route that we have in the game, they are. I have not spotted a single one, and this is, I think, prototypical for older Austrian routes. For quite some time, they just did not install 500 Hz magnets. We will just get to what they installed instead of the 500 Hz magnets, but they are typically not there. In our route here on the Austrian side, we don't have 500 Hz magnets really. So those thingies are typical. They are not only typical, they are unique for Austrian routes. This kind of distant signal repeaters called the Signalnachahmer. I've said this before. It sounds a bit for German ears like an signal imitator. It's Signalnachahmer, and they imitate or they replicate the distant signal and tell you what you have to expect on the next main signal. So this is the semaphore version, the digital semaphore version for here. Closed bar signal is at red, and if they are just like that without an orange or yellow border, then it will not have any magnet. So you will obviously have to obey what this thing is telling you, but you do not necessarily need to push any key or do anything to get around the penalty brake. It is another thing if this distant signal repeater has the orange or yellow border and it is showing this aspect with the horizontal line telling you that the main signal that you are running up to is at a red aspect. Then this signal is actually armed with an active 1000 Hz magnet, and you have to push your acknowledge key, your Wachsamkeitstaste, so that you do not get a penalty brake here. You can see it in my presentation here. According to the rules, and I've seen some cab ride videos that actually confirm this, if the Signalnachahmer with an orange or yellow border shows this aspect telling you that the next signal is at red, then it should not be white like this and in the game, but it should be actually yellow to warn the driver that there is a magnet that she or he has to acknowledge. In the game, they are white. I'm not entirely sure if this is some older version of that. Sometimes it's like this, but I think it should be yellow in the game as well. So as I've said, typically the 500 Hz magnets are missing in Austria, at least on the route that we are running on, but this does not change that in the rules they are provided for the 500 Hz magnets. So what is your sequence? What you have to do? This is a bit recap from the German system. It is totally the same. In PZB O, you can see that you are in the PZB mode O, obere, upper speed range. Then you will have this 85 indicator illuminated on your cab telling you that you are running in PZB mode O. When you are passing a signal of that kind, a double yellow Vorsichtssignal with the 1000 Hz magnet active, you have to hit your vigilance key, Wachsamkeitstaste, your acknowledge key, with a ball on top of it. On the Vectron, it actually has a yellow ball on top of it to tell you that it corresponds with the yellow signals. Nice. So if your train passes the 1000 Hz magnet, then the 85 indicator starts flashing, and you have, on German modern trains, it is 2.5 seconds. According to this Regelwerk here in Austria, it is 4 seconds supposedly. I would probably not always trust on that and try to hit the vigilance key within 2.5 seconds after passing these magnets, and do not not go for using the full length of the 4 seconds. At least after 2.5 seconds the brake curve starts to drop, and you should be already slowing down at this point. So you have to hit your vigilance key, and what happens is the 1000 Hertz yellow lamp turns on, just like we know that from Germany, and you have 23 seconds after passing the magnets to bring down your speed below the 85. And this 85 here is actually the hard limit that the system provides. If you are at 85 straight, then the train will stop you short with a penalty brake. You have to be below. On German operating rules, we have the provision that we always have to be 5 clicks, 5 kilometers per hour below those limits. This is why in my German PZB videos I have given you always the numbers where the 5 are already subtracted. I have not found a similar provision in the operating rules that I could lay my fingers on for Austria. This is why I'm giving you here the limits that the system actually provides before it intervenes with the penalty brake. It definitely makes sense to do this -5 clicks also in Austria, so aim for 80 if the system tells you 85 is the limit, so that in case you're running across a little bump in the track, that you are not just accelerated beyond the 85. So go for 80 if the chart tells you 85 at this point. So you pass this starts flashing, you hit your vigilance key, you start slowing down, or you start slowing down as soon as you see the signal, so that you are below the 85 within 23 seconds. That can be quite harsh if you're actually running 160. What is the fastest speed that is allowed also in Austria, just like in Germany, when you're running according to wayside signals, slowing down from 160 to 85 in this 23 seconds, if you just saw the signal, can be a quite challenging brake path. Whether you have to acknowledge those repeaters without the orange border, I cannot really tell you. In Germany, it is according to the operating rules that you always have to acknowledge every repeater with an aspect that is acknowledgeable, like everything that has some yellow in it. If you ask a train driver, they always say we are acknowledging signals, not magnets, and this is the dogma there. I don't know if it's the same dogma in Austria, so it definitely does not hurt to hit your vigilance key, but if you don't, then nothing bad happens. Unlike if you don't hit your vigilance key after passing the active 1000 Hertz on distant signal repeater showing this horizontal aspect with an orange border. Again, in the game it would be not yellow here, this aspect, but white. Nevertheless, the magnet is active, trust me, so you have to acknowledge it to prevent yourself from getting a penalty brake. Again, the lamp, the yellow lamp, is maybe already on because you passed this signal and you got it on. If it extinguished in between, then it will turn on again. If it was on all the time, it will go off for just a short period and on again, so that you can see that the system acknowledged your acknowledge of the 1000 Hertz and that you got a new one. And this one is actually running in the background now. So this one, the first one that you got, is the one that the system is using for calculating the brake curve. And in case that for some reason this one runs out or gets ended, then the second one is running in the background. And so you have from this magnet here again the 23 seconds to slow down to 85 according to this monitoring. Normally, this does not matter because you're already slowing down for this monitoring. If you happen to actually get the 500 Hertz magnet, then the yellow lamp will turn into a red lamp. And at this point, when you're hitting this magnet, you have to be already below the 65 in PZB mode O. Otherwise, you will get an immediate penalty brake. So this is the 500 Hertz. Sets the next gate for your slowing down race, and if you are faster than the 65 at this point, then you will get stopped. So this is why when you're passing a signal of that kind, expect red at the next signal. You don't stop slowing down at the 85, but you continue slowing down to the 60 again. I already subtracted the 5 points margin of error, and then you can release a bit and the brakes, I mean, and let the train roll. If you actually get the 500 hertz, then you have to continue slowing down, because then you have exactly 153 meters to slow down below the 45. If you don't do that, you get the penalty brake, and then you obviously have to slow down to 0 until you get to the signal, because you must not pass the red signal. So this is your race to the bottom, if you want to call it like this. You have to slow down, and you will get checked at certain points. And in PZB 90, you actually have a predefined brake curve running at this point here, or at least 2.5 seconds after passing the magnet. And obviously the speed curve declines, and the train will always check your current speed against the speed curve. And if you're going not slow enough, then the train will stop you with a penalty brake. This is the indicator that lights up on a modern train, telling you that a penalty brake has been initiated, the S on red ground, and this is the standard response of the system of the train for everything that you don't do as you're supposed to do it. Here, pushing the acknowledge key, slowing down to 85 within the 23 seconds, pushing the acknowledge key again, being beyond or below the 65 when you hit the 500 hertz, and slowing down below the 45 within the 153 meters, and then not stopping in front of the red signal. These are all, or many causes that can give you a penalty brake in this sequence here. This is PZB mode O. Obviously, there are PZB mode M and U, obere, mittlere, untere, upper, middle, and lower. And which mode you're supposed to run depends on your brake percentage. And this is more or less the mass of your, or the other way around, the brake capacity, the brake force of your train divided by the mass of your train. So the higher this value is, the better is your brake performance in this train. And on passenger trains, you always are on PZB mode O. On freight trains, it can be lower. Very often they are at M. Some freight trains, especially with empty cars, are in PZB mode O. Nevertheless, but the most of the freight cars that have cargo on it are in M, and some are even in U, so for the lower ones. And for that, you calculate this brake percentage. There are quite complicated rules. I don't want to go into that in this stream here. But if you are in the area of 111 Bremshundertstel and above, then you can run in O, and in the region 66 to 110, you would be in M. M, you will not have the 85 indicator illuminated, but the 70 indicator illuminated. And apart from that, the sequence runs just like this. Passing the active 1000 hertz, it will start flashing. You have to hit your vigilance key. Then the 1000 hertz yellow lamp will turn off, and then a little difference because it is a different program. The train is heavier, the brake force of the train is not as good. That means you have more time, but you have to slow down to a lower value at this point, right? So the maximum speed that you can go in M would be 120, I think, and that means you have to slow down from the 120 to the 70 within 29 seconds. You have a bit more time, but you have to be slower at this point already in the PZB mode M. And then it goes on again, the same thing. 1000 hertz magnet needs to be acknowledged, and the same thing here. There will be a second monitoring running in the background, and in case you actually have hit an active 500 hertz, you need to be down to 50. So you can see those values here, and this value, and then again this value. Those three values are lower in PZB mode M. Apart from that, it is totally the same. Obviously, you also have to stop in front of the red signal, and the reaction of the system will be a penalty brake. This is just like it is in Germany. This is more or less a recap for for the system how it works in Austria, and since it is the same system, it works the same way as it works in Germany. For the PZB, for the really heavy freight trains that have not so good brake performance, you would run in U, that is if you have 65 Bremshundertstel or lower, or if your train is forced by regulations. We have a video about that, how to set up your brakes depending on the mass of the train and other parameters for the German system. I have not found any corresponding rules for the Austrian system, but the outcome is the same. If your train is supposed to run in G according to the timetable, then you are in U regardless of any brake percentage that you have. If you're not running necessarily in brake mode G, then it depends on the Bremshundertstel, and if you're 65 or lower, then you have to run in U. But there is also that 25 speed rule. No, the 25 kilometer speed rule for what? You type that. I will come back to that. We will get to some 25 in the restricted percentage and stuff later. Let's first let's first go through the line here on the PZBU. Again, the same thing. 1000 Hertz leads to this thing flashing. You have to hit your vigilance key. Yellow lamp for the 1000 Hertz will light up, and then you have quite a long time because you have a heavy train to slow down. 38 seconds to slow down to 55. Maximum speed for PZB would be 100 kilometers per hour, so you have to slow down. You almost have to half your speed, right? It sounds doable, 38 seconds, but run a PZBU train in the game and slow down from 100 to 50, and then it needs some experience and practice not to stall the train then, because as soon as you're braking heavily, then you have to release them again to let the train go. So I really like driving those heavy trains. It's fun, but sometimes it is a bit frustrating, especially if you don't know the route that you're driving on, and every formation is a bit different, every locomotive is different. Well, same thing here. Again, it needs to be acknowledged at the 1000 Hertz if it is active. And for the 500 Hertz, we have the values lowered again. It is 40 that you need to be below at the 500 Hertz magnet, and you need to slow down below the 25 at the end of the 153 meter sequence before you then can stop in front of the red signal. So for the three modes, there are actually three values that are different. One is the speed that you need to be at after the 1000 Hertz monitoring, with different times that are allowed for you to slow down to that. Those speeds are easily to memorize because you have it actually on your cab indicators, right? The 85, the 70, and the 55. And then for the 500 Hertz magnets, you have to memorize it. It's below 65 for O, 50, and 40 for M and U. And for here, OMU, the outcome of at the end of the 500 Hertz before you actually approach the red signal, is 40, 30, 20 if you subtract the 5. So that is no rocket science to memorize this actually. 40, 30, 20, and this is 60, 45, 35 if you subtract the 5. And here it is 80, 65, and a 50. Again, the answer of the train will be a penalty brake. And one interesting fact, and I actually stumbled across this because I thought, why do the rules say that there is no PZB mode U in Austria? And actually, during the times when we used PZB 60, that is the forerunner of the PZB 90 system, the older system, the Austrian locomotives would not use PZB U for reasons that I am not entirely sure of why it is like this, but it is in the rules. They just say if a train has less brake hundertstel than 111, then you are in PZB mode M. Period. And also the SUSI manual has the provision telling you that PZB 60 in Austria does not use PZB mode U. But in the PZB mode 90, it uses PZB mode U. And obviously in the Class B system description here, it is described just as we know it from Germany. So, but further on, let's stay with the PZB mode O, what is for all passenger trains and many freight trains as well. The interesting thing, just have a look at what this looks like if the signal is actually clear. That is very easy, because then all the magnets are actually switched off. The 2000 Hertz is inactive. The corresponding distance signal would show you expect clear, so the 1000 Hertz is inactive. The signal repeater would show you this aspect here with the open bar, expect clear. Main signal is showing clear, and even if it has an orange border, meaning that there is a magnet, it is totally okay that this aspect is now in white, telling you that the magnet is not active. And if there is a 500 Hertz magnet, obviously it is inactive too. So we have just this whole line switched to inactive, and we can just run through. The 85 indicator is illuminated, telling us that the system is running, but it won't do anything. So we can just go on and we don't need to do anything. What with those signals, protection signals, we have seen that in the game, typically without the white line in the middle. We have talked about this last week, that according to the rules, they should have this white line, but there are older versions, and the ones that we have in the game are obviously older versions that do not have the white line in the middle, but the white border typically. Those are not main signals, but protection signals, and those protection signals, they show this aspect, Fahrverbot. Yeah, then they are typically protected with a 2000 Hertz magnet as well. So if you want to pass them, if you are supposed to pass them, if you are allowed to pass them, because you have a written order, for example, then you have to hit your override key, your Befehl 40 taste, so that you don't get stopped by the active 2000 Hertz magnet. And then obviously it is, if it is like this, if you're running up to a protection signal, they can have a 500 Hertz magnet, or they are supposed to have one according to the rules. In the game, they don't have the 500 Hertz magnet, but obviously not all the other stuff. There will be no 1000 Hertz, or not necessarily a 1000 Hertz restriction in front of them if you are running on a red protection signal. But they can nevertheless be protected, and typically are, by 2000 Hertz magnets, and they should have, according to the rules, also a 500 Hertz magnet. Also this one that you can encounter sometimes, you know that it is a main signal, a red main signal, that allows you to pass as a shunting service. You sometimes get this if you get stopped on the main line and then you are routed into the yard. You sometimes get a signal that looks like this, or if you are supposed to couple up to a train, then you are allowed to go into the track with that one, but that is not a clear signal, but a signal that tells you can pass on, but only as a shunting service. And those signals, since they are still a stop signal, they will have the 2000 Hertz magnet on. So that is totally prototypical in the game, that they have it on. So you have to hold down your Befehl 40, your override key, and go into the Befehl 40 program, restricted to 40 kilometers per hour when passing a signal of that kind. So don't forget that. Don't be happy that you see the white dots. Yes, I can go on. You have to hold down your override key at this point if you don't want to get stopped. And yeah, another thing, if you're running up to a signal of that kind, I think this should nevertheless be announced by a yellow distance signal telling you that the next main signal is at stop, even though it might have the two additional white dots allowing you to pass on as a shunting service. We will see it later in the free roam experiments that I have prepared, that the game can get you in a situation where you get an expect clear on the distant, expect clear on the repeaters, and then you run into this signal here, requiring you to slow down to 40. And yeah, I think this is not correct. You should get at this point the normal sequence that precedes a stop signal, even if you then are allowed to go on as a shunting service. Those signals here, this is a protection signal again, according to the rules with the white line in the middle, in the game without the white line in the middle, because they are older signals. This is not a signal that allows every train service to pass, but only shunting services are allowed to pass this protection signal. Or as well, this one here, only shunting services are allowed to pass these signals, not train services. Those signals should not be protected with a 2000 Hertz magnet according to the rules that I have read. Actually, here in these ergänzende Bestimmungen, there is actually a table that tells you what magnet should be active at what signal, and those signals, they are actually called Verschubverbot aufgehoben, shunting ban lifted. They are not among them. In the game, I've stumbled at least over one occasion where a signal of that kind was protected with a 2000 Hertz magnet. Maybe we have the time and I can show you with a free roam experiment that it is like this. Okay. That was the sequence that led up to a stop signal actually with a 500 Hertz if they are there, and the 2000 Hertz protecting the red signal. What happens if we are not running up to a signal that requires us to stop, but that requires us to slow down, like here a clear 60 signal? Then obviously the 2000 Hertz magnet cannot be active, because otherwise we could not pass the signal properly. We are allowed to pass the signal with 60, so not even with the Befehl 40 override key we could pass this. So the magnet is off in this situation. The distance signal would show this, expect clear 60, and this signal is protected with a 1000 Hertz magnet. So the 1000 Hertz magnet is active at this signal. So 1000 Hertz is active, 2000 Hertz is not active. And the rules say both the expect 40 and the expect 60 should be protected with a 1000 Hertz magnet. The corresponding repeater or Signalnachahmer would be that one with the lowered bar pointing to the floor, telling you main signal is clear with speed restriction, not telling you whether it is 40 or 60 or whatever. If it has no orange yellow border, just like always, there is no magnet. If it has an orange border, according to the rules, it should not be active at this point, so you don't have to acknowledge this one again. Unlike the one that tells you that the main signal is at stop. And the 500 Hertz magnet, even if it is there, obviously it is inactive. Would not make any sense to slow you down even more. So you only get the 1000 Hertz, and so you only have to react to the 1000 Hertz. In PZB O, indicator would start flashing. You again have the 4 seconds according to the rules that I have read. In Germany it would be 2.5 seconds on modern locomotives and trains, so try to do it as fast as possible. Hit the vigilance key, then the yellow lamp will turn on, telling you that you are in 1000 Hertz monitoring and you have to slow down to 85, just like it was with that sequence here. Totally the same, but then it does not go on. You don't have to acknowledge this, you don't have to acknowledge this, at least not for the benefit of the PZB 90 system. If the operating rules actually require you to acknowledge those signal repeaters, I can't tell you. There are obviously more internal operating rules, or there must be, more than the ones that are openly accessible on the ÖBB Infra site, but I don't have them. So I can't tell you whether you should acknowledge them or not. Probably not, because there is, as far as I know, no situation where there can be an active magnet on a signal repeater of that kind. The 500 Hertz you never need to acknowledge, and then you just have to slow down and bring your speed below the 60 until you pass the signal here. So this is more or less half the sequence of that kind, without the 500 Hertz, without the 2000 Hertz element. Just have to acknowledge, go down to the 85, and then manage your speed, so in accordance with the aspect on the signal. If you don't comply, train will give you a penalty break. Same if you don't have a clear 60 like this one, but a clear 40, and you have to obviously slow down to 40 at this point, and you will get this distance signal, expect clear 40. And what I already told you, there should not be an active 1000 Hertz magnet at this signal repeater aspect. I will show you the start of a scenario in the game where this repeater obviously or seems to have a 1000 Hertz magnet active anyway, but I don't think that this is where it's supposed to be. This aspect should not have a 1000 Hertz magnet active. Repeaters only in this aspect here with the horizontal line announcing the stop signal. Then it should be active only if it has the orange border, and then it should appear in orange lamps. No with white like in the game, but nevertheless the 1000 Hertz is typically active in the game, even if the aspect is shown in white here. Yes, what else is there to know for this lower sequence here? Let's take this out of the equation again, so that we have some room. What do we do with speed reductions that are not expect clear 40 or 60, but something else in between? We have heard this last week on the stream that just like in Germany, we can have this additional numbers shown. If they are shown in orange or red, orange or yellow, then it is expect this. It is the advanced announcement of it. If they are shown in white, then it is the execution. So we can show different speeds, not only 40 and 60. And we have seen this at the beginning of this stream here, that there can be an 8 for 80, for example, shown. Then we would have an yellow or orange 8 here, and they can actually have numbers starting from 1 up to 6.5, so you can have actually half values here, and just like in Germany you always have to multiply this. So this would be the 10 and this would be 65 actually, that is announced at this point. And in this speed range 10 to 65, they should that at the main signal then would result in a corresponding speed limit to 10 or 65. Here is the announcement, here is the execution. Here you should always have an active 1000 Hertz according to the rules. In the speed range from 7 to, meaning 70 to 95, that is announced, that translates to 70 and 95 execution here at the main signal. You typically do not have an active 1000 Hertz magnet according to the rules, only if you have this additional sign, this gelbes Trapez, yellow or orange trapezoid, indicating the driver that even though it is this extended speed range here, you have an active 1000 Hertz at this announcement signal. Why the signaling rules in Austria are of the kind that they are always telling the driver if there is a magnet installed or not is a question that is interesting to think about, because in Germany they always have this dogma of you're not acknowledging magnets, you're acknowledging the signals, and so the driver does not actually need to know if there is a magnet or not. He has to acknowledge anyway, which he has to acknowledge anyway. Here in Austria, we are supposed to get the information whether there is a magnet or not attached to this signal and so on. So according to the signal book, in the range of 70 to 95, there is only, or there always should be, an indication of a magnet of that kind with the yellow trapezoid additional signal. If the speed indications are not shown with the indicators of that kind here, but with the permanent speed reduction signs, like here the announcement and then the execution up to the speed range of 65 again, just like here, there should be an active 1000 Hertz. Beyond that, starting at 70, there is no 1000 Hertz magnet active. And they only should have a 1000 Hertz magnet if the drop is at least 30 kilometers. So if we are dropping from 65 to 30, for example, then they should have the magnet. If not, then they are not required to have done one. So if you're only dropping from 65 to 50, for example, then there does not necessarily be a magnet. In the game, I have not spotted a magnet at a reduction of that kind, because most of the time the reductions are quite moderate and we don't have that high maximum speed on this line. Anyway, at least not with the Talent train. Same holds true for this kind of a speed reduction sign that translates in the execution here that we typically have on temporary reductions. I have not seen one in the game at all. Yeah, these are the rules that I read out of this thing here. I might want to show you at this point where is it here? This obviously is the Signalbuch. This is where all the signals are described. I want to show you that short quickly. So here is all the descriptions of the signal if you're interested in that. And here is the additional rules. We will have a look at this later for the PZB. And I think these are the additional rules for the additional rules. And they are quite short for PZB 90. I want to look at this additional rules for PZB 90. You always have to acknowledge every 1000 Hertz magnet. If you run across an active 2000 Hertz, you have to acknowledge that. Okay. And a penalty brake can only be released if you stopped. Good. We knew that before. We didn't necessarily need that, but this document is interesting because it has this table here that I talked about earlier, telling you that where needs to be a 500 Hertz, 1000 Hertz, and 2000 Hertz magnet. And here you can see, for example, 2000 Hertz magnets with a 500 Hertz in front should only be at the stop signal, Halt, even if they have a set signal and Vorsicht signal, or the protection signal that shows a red light. That would be the Verschubverbot here, not the other ones that I have shown you in between. And if you are in the speed range above the 65 that we have seen, then we can get those GPE, Geschwindigkeitsprüfeinrichtung, or GPA, Geschwindigkeitsprüfabschnitt. So this is where I got my knowledge from, and this is this document that describes how the PZB 90 has to work if it needs to be used as a Class B system in a ETCS. And there you have a lot of those indicators. For example, you can see what kind of messages you can get on a display, like on the Traxx 2 that is in the system here, not on the Talent, it is too old, but on the Talent 2, for example, what kind of messages you can get, like 2000 Hertz magnet run, or V-Überwachung, that's always telling you what speed it is monitoring you to. So interesting, you also have those diagrams for what brake curve is actually monitored and so on. So if you're interested, you can have a look at that. Back to the presentation. Yeah, again, just to recap, the expect clear 60, expect clear 40 will have an active 1000 Hertz magnet. If you happen to get a yellow indicator, then the speed range up to 65 will have a 1000 Hertz magnet active. The speed range up to 95 only if it has this additional signal. With the fixed installations, only if the drop is at least 30 kilometers, and only up to the speed range of 65. If it is beyond that, you can have this overspeed sensor loop, the GPA, protecting that, but no more active 1000 Hertz magnets. And this is actually now this is unique for Austria. In Germany, you almost have on the LF6 signs what looks like this signal here, but turned around, indicating a change in the permanent speed limit. You have this at almost every reduction and have active 1000 hertz up to speeds of 70, including 70. You know that 80 and 90 have this regulation that they only have 1000 hertz active if you are running more than 15 kilometers above the indicated speed limit, and above that we have over speed sensor loops in Germany. So this is a different thing in Austria compared to the rules in Germany. Well, the 500 hertz would be active here, and if actually we have a 500 hertz magnet active in a speed reduction, like we have that in Germany up to speeds of 35, we typically have a 500 hertz magnet active, even if you are not supposed to stop, but to slow down. If the speed is slower than 40 kilometers. I don't know if they built that in Austria or not. It is in the PZB 90 rules that you can install a 500 hertz magnet in this case, where you're actually running up to like a 2 or a 3 or a 3.5 even. But since they are quite reluctant to put up those 500 hertz magnets, at least in the game I have not seen them. So they are typically inactive. Special situation. Now we have learned that in Austria we typically do not have the 500 hertz magnets. In the situation where you are sitting with your train at a station and are supposed to leave, but you can see maybe not the exit signal, but the repeater telling you here without any magnets installed that the exit signal is at red. So you should not start your train versus the red signal, maybe, unless the dispatcher tells you to. In a system with a 500 hertz magnet active, this 500 hertz magnet would prevent you from releasing. You start your train, since you stopped, you typically have, because you passed a yellow signal before you stopped, you are in a restricted 1000 hertz monitoring, limiting you to 40. You cannot release, because if you release and then you hit the 500 hertz, you would be stopped immediately with a penalty break. Also, again, if you want to hear more about releasing and restricting, we have 2 videos about those 2 aspects, PZB specials, release and restricted monitoring. Or if you already passed the 500 hertz magnet before you stopped, then you are in a restricted 500 hertz, limiting you to 25. In any case, you cannot really start your train accelerating versus the red signal, because either you have already passed the 500 hertz magnet or you will pass it. It will prevent you from releasing, and it will most probably throw you in a restricted 500 hertz, limiting you to 25. But if the magnet is not there, then we do not have this protection. So a train starting in this position, disregarding this signal repeater, could start and accelerate. And if there is enough room, the train can build up a significant speed, still be in full acceleration when it hits the 2000 hertz magnet at this signal. And then obviously when the train is accelerating, it can be stopped by the penalty brake in only a longer distance than the train that is idling or already braking. The accelerating train will have a longer overlap. So this is a dangerous situation, one of the situations that led to the introduction of the 500 hertz magnets in Germany. And how can we cope with that if we don't have or don't want to install 500 hertz magnets? One thing, and that you can actually find on the route here, is interesting, that you can put the 2000 hertz magnet not at the exit signal, but already on the repeater here. It does not even have a yellow border because it does not have a 1000 hertz magnet, but the 2000 hertz magnet can be here and active, and if the train starts accelerating, it will be stopped short at this repeater already, so that there is no danger that this train ever passes the red signal here. So we have discussed this at Bregenz in the stream last week. I don't know, CD Radar, if you actually managed to get there in the meantime and look if it is like this. We will get to there with the free roam and see those thingies in action. There are also installations where you have a magnet that can act as a 2000 Hz as well as a 1000 Hz magnet. In Nüziders, for example, when running up to Bludenz, we will see a magnet of that kind in the free roam experiment just after the presentation. Then it should have its orange border and should show the aspect in yellow when the signal is red, and then there must be some logic that decides whether this magnet should act as a 1000 Hz or whether it should act as a 2000 Hz magnet, stopping the train or preventing the train from starting, or just throwing it into a 1000 Hz monitoring, limiting it to probably 40, because it will most probably be restricted monitoring at this point. So this is an installation or type of installation, or two types of installations that I have not seen in Germany so far. Maybe they are there as well, but I have not read about them in the rules and have not encountered them in real life so far. So this we will have a look at with the free roam experiments after the presentation. Or probably we do it just right now, then go back for the last bit of the presentation and then do the last part of the experiments if we have time. We have already 1 hour 40. Yeah, well, why not? So the first thing I wanted to do, and this is where I wanted to use the choose a route, free roam. We're going to Bregenz. I think that is Bregenz. No, this is Lochau-Hörbranz. And it must be somewhere around here, Riedenburg, and this is Bregenz. This is where I want to end up. And I think I will use the Traxx 2 locomotive, because it has this display that displays the messages and tells us actually where our penalty brake comes from. So free roam. This is Bregenz station. Now we are looking towards Feldkirch and Bludenz. You can see here the repeaters without any border, showing that the signals are at red. In free roam, all the signals are red until we set any path. This is why this mode is so great to check things out. All the signals are red. And here is the part what I talked about. Signal repeater, no border, so no 1000 Hz magnet, showing this aspect. Here it is okay that it is in white because it does not have an active 1000 Hz. Signal at the end will be at red. And this magnet here is simply a 2000 Hz magnet that you would expect only at a stop signal or at the protection signal, but not at the repeater. Let's see what happens if we try to pass it. What is a bit difficult here is you don't really know which 185.2 is the one that comes with the DLC here. I think it is this one. It is the only one that has the LZB switch activated. Of course not. Yeah, that was a bit of a joke. So, let's get this thing here up and running. Doing this quickly.
Störung. AFB, AFB, AFB.
Okay, again. We're sitting here, stopped with our train. We are in PZBM here now. Maybe we want to switch that so that we have the impression of PZBO. Just switching the PZB mode to O doesn't do anything. On those oldish locomotives you have to switch off the PZB and on again. Then it changed here to 85, showing us we are in PZB mode O now, limited to 85. When we start, probably limited to 45 because of the start program. But this is not so important. The thing is, I try to pass this magnet here to see if it is on. That annoying sound, I'm sorry. And chuck, we get a Zwangsbremsung penalty brake, 2000 Hertz. So this 2000 Hertz magnet is actually active, preventing us from running up to the red signal here. Whereas the corresponding situation in Nüziders is a bit different. We will see that. Unfortunately, it takes always a bit to get back to the main menu and then in the route again. See, the radar does not like the sound of the trucks too. Well, I can feel you. Is that Nüziders? It is Nüziders. There is the umlaut is missing, but nevertheless, this is where I wanted to end up. So just getting the bearings, yeah. Towards the mountains is towards Bludenz. So this is the second but last stop before you get to Bludenz. And here again, situation, repeater before we get to the next signal. We can't see it from here, but this time it has an orange border. And it has a different magnet. It has a magnet that can be 1000 Hertz or a 2000 Hertz magnet at this point. So different situation, not only a 2000 Hertz without the yellow border, but the version with the magnet that can be a 2000 and a 1000 Hertz magnets. Again, I will spawn the annoying sound locomotive. Again, I want PZB mode O.
AFB, 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 Störung, Störung.
PZB mode O. And I pass the signal. If the 2000 Hertz magnet is on, we should get immediately a penalty brake. If the 1000 Hertz magnet is on, maybe I should release the independent brake. Doesn't want to release. Maybe I did not turn on
AFB,
the AFB properly.
AFB.
Okay. Now it works. Let's see what happens. Starting program, and we are getting 1000 Hertz monitoring. That means the 1000 Hertz was on, not the 2000 Hertz, and we are allowed to go. We cannot release because we just got a new 1000 Hertz monitoring. It says Türfreigabe because we are dropping below the 30. That means we are allowed to open the doors. Hi Berge, nice to see you on the chat. And now we can approach the signal that is probably still showing red. but only with 40. And I've seen a cab ride video of a Talent train doing just this, going all this part of the track with 40 until it got to the next signal, and it is quite a way. But by doing this, obviously the system prevents us from releasing too early, from approaching this signal that is still red too fast. What I don't really know is what the logic is for this particular signal, for putting it into 1000 Hertz mode or putting it into 2000 Hertz mode.
Kühlfreigabe. Kühlfreigabe. Kühlfreigabe.
Yeah. That was that. I won't go into the station here for reasons of the stream already getting close to 2 hours. Next thing that I wanted to demonstrate is the fact that some repeaters here have an active 1000 Hertz, even if they are not supposed to have one. For that, I go into the journey mode, and by the way, I still have the service marker on. That should not be on. There is not this one. There is not this one. Where is it? Not this one. That one, I think it is the go hard scenario, where you are supposed to evacuate people from Lindau. And there you are starting in Bregenz. And you can already see there is a protection signal. Well, probably you can see it better if we turn on the wipers. And we have a signal repeater that just cleared to main signal shows clear with speed limit. And we can see the corresponding main signal. So this is white over white, tells us we may pass here. This tells us expect clear with speed limit. And if we go to the main signal, it shows green over green, meaning clear 60 at this point. And from what we have learned in the presentation at this point, the signal repeater showing main signal is showing clear 60 should not have 1000 Hertz active. Let's increase the brightness. And let's see what happened. What happens if they try to pass this signal here. Starting program activates. They are flashing alternatingly, limiting us to 40. Now we're passing the magnet. I think I don't have to acknowledge anything. The yellow lamp is flashing. We're getting a penalty break. The flashing yellow lamp tells us we should have acknowledged an active 1000 Hertz magnet. So obviously the 1000 Hertz magnet that is here, you can still see it here underneath our train. That can be 1000 Hertz and 2000 Hertz. 2000 Hertz in case that this protection signal here is at red, and the 1000 Hertz for the yellow border in case this aspect is shown. But it wasn't shown, it was clear with speed limit, and still it was on. Maybe it changed to this aspect, main signal is showing red, and then it was on and stopped us. all in all, this signal situation here is a bit weird, because the projection signal, after we passed it, did not switch from Fahrverbot aufgehoben, from passing ban lifted, to red Fahrverbot, passing ban, but to Verschubverbot aufgehoben, allowing only Verschubfahrten into this sector. I would have expected to the red light coming on, not this diagonally arranged white lights here. And here the repeater is telling us the main signal is showing stop. But we can clearly see that the main signal is not showing stop, but it is showing clear 60. So this is a weird situation. If it is actually prototypical, then maybe someone can explain it to me in the comments, but I think it should be looked into, because it does not seem prototypical. And the signal repeater showing any other aspect than expect stop at the main signal should not have 1000 Hz magnet on, according to the rules that I have read. Last part of the presentation, restricted monitoring. I have talked about restricted monitoring all the time. Obviously we have a special video covering it, PZB Specials Restricted Monitoring, but just to recap it so that we know it also for Austrian purposes. In PZB mode O, the 1000 Hz monitoring will require you to drop to 85. The 500 Hz monitoring will eventually require you to drop below the 45. PZB mode M will require you in the 1000 Hz monitoring to eventually drop below the 70, and in the 500 Hz drop below the 35. And U will require you to drop below the 50 in the 1000 Hz monitoring, and in the 500 Hz monitoring eventually below the 25 to 20. This is the normal monitoring. So restricted monitoring is activated if you stop while under any monitoring, or if you're going very slowly for 15 seconds below a certain speed that is most of the time 10 kilometers per hour, then it is just like you stopped. And typically when you have to stop at the station, then you drop into the restricted monitoring when you're getting there with the monitoring active. And when the monitoring switches from 1000 Hz to 500, then you will actually inherit the restricted monitoring. It will be still restricted. CD radar says 25 kilometers. If I'm not mistaken, if you run towards red signal and slow below 25, you can't speed up above 25 until 500 Hz goes dark. Yeah, that is what we are getting to right now. If you actually stop and get or already have a 500 Hz monitoring, then you will go into a restricted 500 Hz monitoring, and we will just see that the restricted 500 Hz monitoring will reduce you to 25 kilometers max. So typically you should aim for 20. So in case that you drop into the restricted monitoring because you stop or go too slow for 15 seconds, but typically because you stop, because you have to stop in front of the red signal or at a station, then you drop from your regular monitoring into the restricted one. And you see that on the older versions by the alternately blinking or flashing 70 and 85 indicators. On the more modern MFDs, like on the Traxx 2, you won't see them flashing alternatingly, because you will have those text indicators telling you what is actually happening. It will always tell you the speed that it is controlling you to. On the latest version of the displays, actually the alternating flashing should actually be there again, because you don't have those text messages anymore. Just like on the newest version of the ICE 3 in Kassel-Würzburg, there should be this alternatingly flashing, but it isn't. Or the Vectron, you really should look onto it. I looked at it a bit, but I will look at it more in depth. Is that the alternating flashing lights on the Vectron, or is it the one with the text messages? It has text messages, no? Well, maybe we just use the Vectron for the next experiment, and we will see together. So if you go into the restricted monitoring, and it is shown to you by the talent, by the alternating flashing, or by the text message that you are in a restricted monitoring, then those values get downgraded. The 1000 Hertz monitoring will no longer be 85, 70, 55, but it will be reduced to 45. Yeah, so that you have to aim for 40. There are just text like on the Traxx, or maybe more text on the Vectron. We will look at this, and I think this was my impression, yeah, that you have the text messages. But on the most modern displays, the ones that have those split screen, like those two portrait format screens like on the ICE3 that you have on Castle Würzburg, there the flashing alternatingly of 70 and 85 should be back, because then you don't have the text indicators anymore. And we have discussed this when Trains in World 3 came out, that on the version that is in the game, that you can't really see whether you are in a restricted or a non-restricted monitoring. Yeah, but typically this is the indication that tells you that you are in a restricted monitoring. On the Traxx 2 or the Vectron, you would have a text message telling you that you are restricted V-Überwachung 45. Then you know that you are in a restricted monitoring. And the 500 Hertz values drop to 25 in all modes. Obviously in mode U there is nowhere to drop anymore, because it started out to be 25, so it will be actually the same as before. And this is what you said, the 25 km/h rule. As soon as you get a 500 Hertz monitoring and stopped before or afterwards, so that you are in a restricted monitoring, you are required to not go faster than 25, otherwise the system will stop you. And this is to control trains that are starting against a red signal, so that those trains can be stopped within a very short overlap, so that the trains have not a chance to speed up to any dangerous speeds. And this is also why, if you in any situation are required to start your train against a signal that you do not know what it is supposed to show, then you should keep below the 25 to check it out. And this is the only speed that is deemed safe enough, so that you don't cause too much damage in case you should run the red signal. And the starting program that you typically get at the beginning of a service when you just start your locomotive is more or less a situation where you are in a restricted 1000 Hertz, in a situation where the yellow lamp already has come off. We have not discussed this today, but in the course of 1000 Hertz monitoring, after you have run a certain distance, the yellow lamp will come off, telling you that you can release. We will talk about this in a second. And then you can release. And in the starting program, you will start with a restricted monitoring of the appropriate kind, restricting you always to 45, but with the yellow lamp already off, so you can release technically from that. So the starting program is more or less putting you in a situation as if you had stopped under 1000 Hertz monitoring that has already run off to the point where you are in a position where you can release. Yes, 20 is on site. This is more or less the idea of that. Talking about releasing from monitoring, that is the Frei-Taste, the key that allows you to not completely end the monitoring, but put it aside so that you can accelerate harder. This is when in the course of the 1000 Hertz monitoring the yellow lamp goes dark. Then technically you can release. We have our video about the release, and there we have discussed that it is always a 3-point decision if you release. The first thing is if it is technically possible to release, and for that the yellow lamp has to come off. Then it is technically possible. And you have to check if the operating rules allow you to release. And in Germany we had the situation that you are only allowed to release if you have clearly seen a signal that allows you to go faster than 30, and that you are not expecting another active magnet 1000 Hertz or 500 Hertz within the next 550 meters. Thank you very much, Smanky Dandy, for your subscription. Yeah, so that is the situation in Germany. So the operating rules only allow you, if you have seen a signal that allows you to go faster than 30, and you're not expecting another active magnet within the next 550 meters. Because the background is, if you get another active magnets within this 550 meters, if it is a 500 magnet, it will stop you at once with a penalty brake, because then the releasing was not improper release. Or if it is a 1000 Hertz magnet, then the monitoring that you released from will become active again with the limit that it was before, all of a sudden, because it was running in the background all the time. And then if you already accelerated beyond the control speed, that it will activate and penalty brake anyway. Yes, hi, he says, you answered my question on the Trains in World forum yesterday. Unfortunately, I was having dinner, but I'm here now. Yeah, very much. I'm very happy about that. So the stream will be on YouTube tomorrow, so you can rewatch any interesting parts that you might have missed. And I really appreciate you joining in and for the subscription with Prime. Yeah, that was the situation in Germany. Then you can actually hit your Frei-Taste and then you're here. And in Austria, there is this provision in the rules that is very interesting. I have, though, not found any explanation why it is like this. I think it is here. No, it is in the ZSB 12. Telling you for here, PZB. And here, Geschwindigkeitsüberwachung bei der PZB 90. Speed control with PZB 90. Item 8. Das Befreien aus der Geschwindigkeitsüberwachung ist nicht zulässig. Releasing from speed monitoring is not allowed. The only exception is that after you have passed the exit signal with your whole train and left the interlocking after the exit signal, then you can release. So this is obviously for the starting program that allowed you to, that allows you here to release in this special situation. About PZB, well, PZB is a thing where everybody should have a lot of things that they don't know about, including me and including even the professionals. It is an entirely absurdly complicated system that was really ingenious when it was invented in 1920, 30 and developed further over the time, and it is super elegant. But if you compare it with a computerized system like ÖBB or then Axis or ETCS level 2 in the end, and it is just like steampunk. I'm looking forward to more ETCS implementation in the game as well. Yeah, I find it a bit weak on TTG's side that they left it totally to Rivet to implement it, because it is such a huge project to implement ETCS that should be done by the bosses and not left to the small third-party guys. So CD Radar just told us what punktuelle Zugbeeinflussung oder punktförmige Zugbeinflussung is called in Czech, and that is bodoví, flakový, zabezpečovač. Okay. If you recognized that how I would pronounce that Czech stuff. Punktförmige Zugbeinflussung. That is, well, train influencing in form of points, if you translate it word by word. So the idea is that you are not getting a constant feed from the track, but only at certain points, at the magnets or at the balises. LZB will be liniovi, flagovi, zabes, pečkovač. All right. So we can see that the bodovi and the liniovi is the difference between punktförmig und linienförmig. But what we have learned now, I can switch off the PDF again to go back to the presentation, that in Austria, from the provision that we just read, is that release is typically prohibited except for this one situation. Clearly the Czech don't want anyone else to speak that language. Well, it is an interesting language. But you sometimes wonder why they need 1,000 words to say that, for example. In English it is that boy. In Czech there are, I think, a couple of hundred possibilities to say this that in that context. That, like all this tam, toho and tohoto words. At least that was my impression when I was going through my Duolingo course the other day. You know what I'm talking about? No. Well, we're not here to talk about Czech language, but about the PZB implementation in Austria. And I wanted just to show how this stuff here is probably supposed to work, with this exception where it is actually allowed to release from PZB monitoring. Imagine this is a station with a platform. The upper one is the main line, the through line, and this is a loop line where you went into for stopping. Then you have an exit signal that shows, just like in our implementation before, shows a clear 60. You stopped because you passed this signal and expect clear 60, and there was an active 1000 Hertz, so you acknowledged and you stopped here with an active 1000 Hertz monitoring, meaning that you are now in a restricted 1000 Hertz, limited to 40. Let's say when you are here in this position, the yellow lamp goes off, meaning that it is technically possible for you to release. But the rules, if you take this seriously, prohibit you from releasing at this point. So you have to stick to the 40 and are not allowed to release unless your train has cleared the interlocking after the exit signal. This is the sign typically for the end of the interlocking, the anschließende Weichenbereich. I don't know if they use that in Austria as well, but in Germany they use that in the Buchfahrplan and stuff. So let's say this is the end of the interlocking and your train has just cleared it, then you can release according to this provision. But this is more or less the only situation where you, according to this provision, are allowed to release. Spanky Danky says, I have seen some unfortunate crashes involving drivers in Germany releasing from restricted monitoring and also overriding it through red aspects. One recent incident being on the Munich S-Bahn, I believe. Yes, that is true. I've forgotten the name of the town, but this is, well, a recent incident. It was a couple of years ago. That was a thing where the dispatcher and the driver of the train worked together to cause a very serious incident. So the dispatcher, and there was this story that he was playing on his mobile phone on some game, but not actually in this situation. But there was always talk about he was distracted by that, and he allowed in a unidirectional train access from both sides with this. I don't know exactly with what signal, but at any rate with exceptional signals, so that from both sides trains entered this part. And the train entering this part from the other side, I think, I hope I'm not mixing up two incidents here, was actually stopped twice by PZB penalty brakes, and he always started his train anew. And so they just had a head-on collision in this unidirectional part of the track, and 3 or 4 people lost their lives, unfortunately. And so maybe these are actually 2 different incidents. Well, I have to look that up maybe, but this is what can happen. I think it's natural human behavior to work against such a strict system. Maybe, but this is if you actually go by the system. And well, one major requirement is if you get a penalty brake, you should tell the dispatcher and ask what you're supposed to do, and then a lot of mayhem can be prevented. Yeah, back to the presentation to get this done, because we are now 2:17 already in the stream. From the 500 Hertz that we do not have in Austria, release is not possible anyway. So if you are in a 500 Hertz monitoring, then you can hit your release key as hard as you want. It won't release. It is just not possible. So if you have actually a 500 Hertz magnet installed here or here, then it would not be a question if it is okay to release or not, because you can't, because you're in a 500 Hertz monitoring at this point, if it is active, obviously. Here in this situation, not, because we don't have a red signal and no active 500 Hertz, but the 500 Hertz, when going towards a red signal, would stop that. And yeah, if you don't have a 500 Hertz, then you need to have stricter rules for release, probably, to prevent that in a situation like this. How do you know that the signal is the exit signal? That is the last part that I wanted to introduce in this presentation. You have in Austria those interesting additional signs at the signals that sometimes or most of the time tell you what type of signal that is. And the exit signal would be called an Ausfahrtssignal, exit signal, AS, whereas the entry signal, the home signal, will be the Einfahrtssignal, ES. And this would be a Zwischensignal, an intermediate signal. Those are the signals that you can encounter in controlled areas like stations, and on the track you can find other markers like Abzw. What is eine Abzweigungsstelle? This is more or less an junction where you can go in 2 ways, and the signals there. This would be a crossover, a Überleitungsstelle. This would be just a Blockstelle, meaning this is just a block signal, more or less. And this would be a Selbstblockstelle, that is an automatic block signal, more or less what we have here. So if you want to know more about those markers for the signals, what is interesting, you can read it up in this Dienstanweisung here with that number 3401 section 7. You can also find those stop marker signs in there, and there you can learn that they are signs that are no longer put up, but still are there. They are still there out there on older lines. So this Selbstblockstelle is more or less an automatic block signal, what we sometimes have in the United States, or we would have in the UK, a marker of that kind, telling you that this is an automatic signal. It is not yellow. It should be yellow according to the rules in the game. I think it is just on the normal whitish, grayish background, even if it is supposed to be yellow. I think I have seen at least one SBL signal, and the codes underneath tell you typically to what location this signal applies to. CD Radar says, it's true that when we drive exceptionally on one track in both directions without an active safety system, we rely entirely on the dispatcher to make sure that two trains don't meet on this section because you can't see far in the tunnel. Well, it obviously depends. Some tracks are signaled in both directions, obviously unidirectional, so those signals should provide an additional safety, but the unidirectional tracks are always a thing where the dispatcher has to make sure from what end the train is allowed to go in. And if you think of all the token systems that you have, especially in the United Kingdom, where the train crew actually got physical tokens in their hands so that they know they are the only ones allowed, and the signal man has to punch this into a machine and call the train to the next signal box on the other side to make sure that only one train is coming in one direction. That shows how important it is with unidirectional lines, that it is clear from which end the train is allowed to enter and from which one not. So it would be great to have that in the game more in historical routes with this token stuff, radio token then later, and the physical token before, because it is super interesting. And obviously the problem still stays with modern train protection systems. You should not allow two trains to go into the same track from both ends, and the signaling system, modern signaling system installations typically prevent that. They prevent the dispatcher from setting the signals and the switches in a way that this allows, so that they have green from both ends. And yeah, and so the problem is still the same, and the signals typically work in that way. If you have a dispatcher then radios the train crew to ignore the signals and go into the line anyway, then you end up with a disaster like the one that we had in Greece a couple of months ago. And Swanky Danky says, I live near a radio electronic token block line here in Scotland. Oh, that's great. So you're from Scotland. Scotland. Yeah, we don't have enough Scottish roots in the game either. Well, at least I'm through with my presentation now. I'm getting a bit carried away because it is nice talking to you guys. Maybe one last thing in the game I wanted to show. Maybe we use the Vectron now. Choose a route. Free roam. And I wanted to get my bearings first. There is Feldkirch, start in Rankweil. Time to use your channel points for the Vectron. Yeah, with the Vectron. I still have to get a better feel for the Vectron. This is why I'm not using it so often here. So we are in Rankweil. This is towards Lindau. This is towards Feldkirch, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just running across the tracks here because we are in free roam. There is not happening much anyway. So spawn a Vectron, please. Would be nice if you could do this in real life, right? Just spawn a Vectron, plop. I have noticed that shunting signals display stop when you are cleared by a main signal anyway on this route. Yep, I have noticed this too. But I think you have to distinguish two cases. If you're actually sent into a yard area with a main signal showing a clear aspect, be it clear or clear 60 or clear 40, then you are a train service, not a shunting service, and then the shunting signals are not required to show the shunting allowed signal, but it can still show shunting prohibited, because you're not the shunting service. You don't have to listen to those signals. But we will see that just right now. If you're sent into the yard at a red signal with the 2 additional white lights, then you have to switch to be a shunting service, otherwise you're not allowed to pass the red signal. And then the shunting signals should actually switch to shunting allowed. It has confused you a couple of times because it's different in the UK. Yeah, that's true. In the UK they should actually open up, because they don't really have this strict distinction between shunting services and regular train services. So I spawned my Vectron. Would be nice to be able to do this. This locomotive, if you buy that on the market, CD Radar, how much do you have to pay for a Vectron? 5 million, maybe, euros? 3 to 5 million, I think, was once mentioned. But maybe they got more expensive. In the meantime, master key, reverser, break in. The PZB mode can be set here, and I think I want PZB mode O because we're running light. We can run in PZB mode O. Brake mode P is already good. The lighting is always a bit weird. We are at automatic, I think. Yeah. Turn on the safety systems. I know a guy that does them on the cheap. The Vectrons. Okay. The thing is, with the light, it is a bit weird. With the light setup. When you are accounting an AI-driven Vectron, you typically have the 3 red lights at the front and 3 white lights at the back connected to the cars, what is nonsense. This should be the correct setup. 3 white lights at the front and 2 white lights at the back if we are running light. So that we have the signal called ZG1 at the front and ZG2 at the back. Now we have the signal lights, but if we switch from signal lights to dimmed high beams, for some reason we lose the lower white lights. They should be on anyway, don't they? So maybe just stick with the signal lights. So the PCB mode is based on weight, right? You must calculate your weight before running. I will say that the Vectron's horn is better than we usually get from Train Sim World. Okay, that was the horn. Okay, that is great. This locomotive is the most sophisticated locomotive that we have ever seen in Train Sim World. So, William Green has outdone himself on this locomotive, and he's still working on a patch. He told me that he even, after I wrote about it on the forum, implemented the Nachbremswirkung, the different setup for that in Austria and in Germany. And yeah, well, here we can, but we have to lower the pantograph, otherwise we cannot change the power mode here. We can actually switch to Austrian power mode, unlike on the Traxx 2 that comes on the Austrian line and cannot be switched to Austrian power mode, but only always has to run with German power mode. Now again. Why can we not close? Do I have to hold it? I have to hold it a bit. And what do you see on the dashboard? What do you see on the dashboard? An incomplete Ebola? Well, whatever. To be able to run anywhere, we have to set a path And this is so great, where we can set paths to. I want to go in the siding, and interestingly, if you go into this siding, you get a different signal compared to going into this siding, for example. If it isn't our check safety system. What is the check safety system here? The Polish safety system. What? Tell me, I want to know where is there stuff for the Czech and Polish safety system on the dashboard? Well, I will start driving a bit. Halt. I have to release to the left. Release the brakes. Above LZB Nothalt. What is LZB Nothalt? Where did the guys find LZB Nothalt now? Right in front of the driver. The red switch, this one, emergency button, that turns off the traction and applies a emergency brake. No, this one, here. Ah, and this one is the check system. This is LB Notstop, yeah, true. And this is, I did not know that. Interesting. Yeah, we need to have that on the in the game so that I can dig into it. It's Mirel. Okay. Then we have to do this. Okay. Now let's go. Limited or restricted 1000 Hertz because it's start program. We should not go faster than 40 unless we release. This is the AS, Ausfahrtsignal, exit signal. That means if we cleared the interlockings with our train and our train is short, we are allowed to release.
Zugbeeinflussung.
We will figure that out, even if there is... So, expect clear. This is what the signals are telling us. Expect clear. Nobody stops me from accelerating to 140. Clear, expect clear. But since I'm not trusting this, expect clear tells us the main signal is at clear. Or this is what it is supposed to. But it's not. It is the red signal with the white dots. And even if I am hitting the override key, we are getting a Zwangsbremsung because we cannot slow down to 40.
Zwangsbremsung. Zwangsbremsung.
So that is, in my opinion, not the way it is supposed to work. If you are getting an expect clear, you cannot get a red signal, even if it allows you to proceed as a shunting service. So let's do this again. A bit faster now. Another Vectron spawn, another 5 million invested. Well, the problem also comes with the truck service in the journey mode here. So this is not only limited to Vectron, but, well, maybe I am wrong here, but if you are approaching a red signal, you should not get an all clear distance signal. Now I just change the PZB mode and not the other stuff. Not the lighting. Not... Yes. You can activate it during running. I will ignore the operating rules and release right away. Yeah, you say shunting should always start from a full stop. Most probably, yeah. But even if you... No, I did not set my path. You can't do this here on the map, can you? No. So, restart that one again. Well, even if they allow you to go without stopping in front of the red star, even if they allow you to switch from a train service into a shunting service, then they cannot signal on the distance signal expect clear and then the signal is red, even though you are... No, that is the wrong seat. Even if you are allowed to go through it. Can I, even with the activated ones, change? Did I change it? Yes, it allows it. Is the Bremse? Ah, the brakes are... Just ruined our brake system a bit.
Zugbeeinflussung. Zugbeeinflussung.
And now let's set the path actually. Apart from that, we are going into the wrong direction. So we can see it overloads me a bit, 2:38 on the stream clock. I have to get this to an end. Let's spawn our Vectron on the correct side. So that we are actually going there. Release the brakes. PZB mode O. It works. We can set the path. I want to go here. Confirm.
Zugbeeinflussung.
Just made it back into the cab. Signal is green, we can release. Now we know how accidents happen, yeah. Luckily, they did not employ me, neither as a dispatcher nor as a driver. But now I think we're good. Now I won't trust the signal. Now just imagine we are not getting a clear expect clear here, but we are actually getting a clear expect stop at this point. Then we would acknowledge, we would slow down to 80. And 60. And then maybe get a 500 Hertz. And go down to 40. I see. I still have to get a feel for the keyboard controls here. And then we can actually slow. And approach it with not more than 40. Then we see it's a red signal. We could stop, but already the two white lights are on. And this even without a stop. And pressing the override key. Here, that one.
Zugbeeinflussung. Zugbeeinflussung. Zugbeeinflussung.
Sends us into the Befehl 40. The white indicator Befehl 40 should light up, shouldn't it? And then text message says monitoring to 40. But this now changed us into a shunting service, if I'm not mistaken, because not being a shunting service, we would not have been allowed to pass this signal. And then we actually should have to stop here. As a shunting service, we are not allowed to pass this signal. But the signals show stop, and the game wants us to proceed. So I think those shunters should all show shunting ban lifted. Yes. The left one? No, there was one on the right as well, no? Ah, the clear, expect clear. Now sometimes they are on the left side as well, so this is not necessarily the problem. I'm speeding a bit because I want to the end. They are typically put up on the right side, but sometimes they can be on the left side as well. And if it is clear to what track they belong, then they don't even need a sign telling you that they are on the other side of the track. Yeah, but that's that. Just to finish the service, we will have to stop at the end of this siding. But I think I got it clear what I wanted to demonstrate with that. I think when you're running up to a red signal with the two white additional lights allowing you to proceed as a shunting service, then you should get a distance signal that is yellow, just like with any other red main signal, even if you are allowed to proceed as a shunting service. And then you switch to being a shunting service, and then the shunting services on the shunting signals on the floor should actually turn to shunting allowed. There is a very good Wikipedia page in German about Mirel. Well, we get to Mirel. I hope we will have that sometime, and then we will talk about this. Guys, it is 2 hours 45 in the stream. I think AJ is already fast asleep. My dog is bugging me that we need to go out. Thank you very much for this lively discussion, for joining me, for bearing with me through this thing. It was a huge chunk of information, even if the easy answer to what safety systems do they use in Austria, well, it is easy. It's just PZB and LZB and ETCS, just like in Germany, is a bit short, and there are actually some interesting variations, especially in the placement of magnets and the corresponding signals. I think the signaling system needs to be looked at certain points, like there are magnets active that should not be active. The yellow aspect should be yellow, not white, and the distant signal preceding a shunting allowed on the stop signal should not be a clear one, and stuff like this. We've worked through a lot of stuff. Thank you very much. I hope we will meet again next week. I don't know yet what we will be doing. Thanks a lot. Have a nice time and take care. Bye bye.